Hey there, welcome to the latest episode of the Campus Comics Cast. We are still coming to you remotely by another degree, other than just through your audio, as we are all still practicing very socially distancing. We're kind of doing this, over the internet still from our respective homes. So just kind of bear with us on any technical difficulties that might arise. We're all super professionals here, though, but you get what you pay for. So there's that too, maybe. But this is Dan, and I'm joined this time by
Scott Reed
and Mike Atchison.
Yeah, and we just want to remind you too that even though we're all socially distanced and far apart right now, the store is open. You can come by Campus Comics at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale. And we are open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 6. And our phone number is 618-457-6011. Or you can look us up on Facebook or Twitter. And we've got a few different things to talk about. A lot of comic talk tonight on this episode. We've been talking earlier in the year. We had a few episodes where we talked about the 80th anniversary of a lot of different characters this year. Well, we realized it's also the 60th anniversary of the Justice League of America. So we thought we'd all kind of find and dig up a Justice League story to talk about, like maybe one of our favorites or like something that's a good story featuring the Justice League. So, Scott, do you want to go first? Because I think you and me will probably be quicker than what Mike's going to talk about.
Well, before we jump into Justice League, do you want to talk about the event that's happening at the store on October 24th?
Oh, yeah. We've got the next mini-con coming up on Saturday, October 24th. So we're going to have some more, vendors set up in the store. Scott, will you be there?
I am planning on it.
Mike will not be there, though, this time because he is predisposed.
So you won't be able to get the complete set of signatures if
yeah. So, but we've had really good turnouts lately with that. Again, there's no conventions this year, so we're trying to do something for everybody, kind of get out and see everybody. That's kind of how I'm catching up with some people right now. Some people, that's the only time I see everybody. So, yeah, come by the store, check that out on that day. Again, we've had good turnouts so far, been going really well, so we're going to try to keep that going, as long as people want us to, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
usually runs from 11 to 5.
Get there early. That's the other part too, because we've had some people come in and kind of swoop stuff up. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely get there early.
Usually around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll slow down a little bit, and some people who are set up there will start tearing down about that time.
Yeah.
So you might miss out on some stuff.
Yeah, but the store closes at 6, and everybody tries to pack up before then, so kind of keep that in mind too if you're planning out your day. Again, earlier the better usually on that. And that's upcoming this October 24th, Saturday is when we're doing that.
All right, so Justice League.
Yep. What were you going to talk about, Scott?
Okay, so my first, I guess, I should say real exposure, but when I was first buying Justice League, I actually started with Justice League Europe. Whenever Justice League Europe #1 hit the shelves, that was really the first time that I was buying Justice League on a monthly basis, because I'm more of a Marvel guy, so I don't know, I was intrigued by the cover. And, of course, as I started reading, what came to be known as the Blah Ha Ha League, I decided, you know what, I should go back and get some of the JLA stuff because it had, it was there, I don't know how long before JLE started up. So back when we were talking about the 80th anniversary of Batman, I had set this book aside actually as a Batman story. But we never came back to telling another Batman story. So I've been sitting in my pile to talk about on the show. I said, hey, well, I can use this because it's from Justice League. I can use this as a Justice League story. So now in this particular issue, and whenever you tell most comic book fans, when you talk about Justice League and One Punch, they know exactly what it is that you're talking about. So it's from Justice League issue 5 by Giffen and DeMatteis with art by McGuire and Gordon. And it's funny how your memory sort of fails you over time. because I would have swore if I had to bet money that this part of the story would have been like in the first 4 or 5 pages of the book, but it's actually not until the middle of the book where we have most of the Justice League. And of course, the Justice League at this time was Mr. Miracle and Guy Gardner and Booster Gold and Captain Marvel, and Batman was actually in charge. And then Black Canary and who else? Oh, Martian Manhunter. Yeah, were the members of the Justice League at that time. So we had this argument going on between Batman and Guy Gardner about who should be leading the team, and Guy Gardner, I guess I don't know if he's always been the smart aleck guy, but being the smart aleck guy feels like that he should be the one that's leading the team. So there's a lot of finger pointing with Guy between Guy and Batman, and basically it gets to the point where Gardner's challenging to a fight. So he takes off his ring and hands it over to Blue Beetle. And in this whole time, not only is Guy insulting, Batman, but he's insulting Captain Marvel and some of the other Justice League members. So, and even Batman is, Captain Marvel tries to intervene. And it's like, Batman basically tells him, when you've had as much experience as I've had, then you can say something. But for now, just get out of my way. So Guy threatens Batman again, and basically it kind of reads like this. Batman basically says, "All bark, no bite. Oh, I bite, all right." And at this point, Captain Marvel's kind of mumbling, walking away because he's been called Captain Whitebread by Guy and told he doesn't have enough experience by Batman. So Guy Gardner screams, "I bite." And you see him throwing the punch. Well, before that punch can land, very next page, top of the panel, you get this nice bonk sound effect, and Batman knocks Guy out with one punch. So, and some of the comments like Mr. Miracle, "I'll say this for Batman, he's efficient." And of course, Blue Beetle is just sitting there laughing, one punch. And at this point, Martian Manhunter and Black Canary walk in, and Black Canary is so upset because she missed it, because she would have loved to have seen, Batman knocking out Guy. So, because he, obviously was the smart mouth. So, several panels on, Blue Beetle is still just, saying one punch to himself. So it's just one of those takes. I know a lot of people probably don't necessarily like a little bit more humorous take on the Justice League, but I never really felt like, for the most part, the characters were widely portrayed out of their, how they were intended. It's not like it's not like as bad as what they're doing with Thor in some of the movies, where they've turned him from this guy who has all this bravado to this guy who's a buffoon. So I don't really feel like they made buffoons of the characters. So it's just, to me, it's just one of those. It's my favorite run of the Justice League, and it's just a scene that I've remembered, ever since I read it. I don't know. It probably was a couple of years after it hit the newsstand before I actually got around to reading it. So
that's a great pick. That's a great pick. And at the time that iteration of the Justice League came around, they needed something drastic to rejuvenate the whole title. It was, I remember distinctly thinking, wow, what is this? They had that often homaged cover, and the we are the all new Justice League, and you're like, this is some motley crew of characters. And it's I mean, if you were to ask 10 people what their favorite panel is in comics, I bet probably 6 of them will say One Punch, or at least most memorable. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the thing is too, with that run, like that had been building since the first issue, basically, with Guy and Batman kind of butting heads throughout. So there really was build up to that scene previously in that series.
And to answer your question, Guy was not the obnoxious guy until, no pun intended there, until Giffen and DeMatteis took over this. He was pretty plain Jane, actually. So they really reinvented the character for this series.
And it's, with the exception of Batman, they were really using characters that just weren't in use anyplace else. I think that they said they were surprised whenever they were able to actually use Batman in the stories. If you looked at some interviews, so they were kind of using a lot of second tier characters, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it gave them a little bit more leeway in dealing with those characters.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It wasn't a comedy that made fun of them. It was an office comedy. It was like a workplace comedy, and you can see the stuff that they did. You could see that happening in your own life or world or whatever.
Yeah,
made it very relatable.
The thing that people complain about that run with the comedy, what I think it's overlooked too much is the Despero story that came later, and is really it's a brutal story in contrast to the rest of that run. But I feel like that story hits harder because you had such a lighthearted buildup.
It's like movies like the one I always think of is Good Morning Vietnam, where you have this comedic actor like Robin Williams, and it's laughs and laughs and laughs, and then you get to the end and it gets very serious, and because of that dramatic mood change, it hits you, like you're saying, it hits you a whole lot harder. And I think they did a good job with that of making that swing and transition. So, well, Dan, what do you got?
Well, mine kind of, some of the themes kind of pick up from that, just with for me growing up, like the Justice League always kind of felt like a licensed comic book. In as much as like you could feel like they could never really do anything crazy with the main characters because they were, under the control of another editor at the time. You're sort of borrowing these characters from other editors at DC when you're doing Justice League. And I feel like that was part of the success behind the Bwahaha era, was they got characters they could do things with. I imagine that's kind of, that's the reason behind that roster was, they knew, especially coming out of Crisis, because this Justice League formed after the Legends event, post-Crisis. And so it was like they were reinventing everybody's origin story. That they probably didn't have everything hammered down as far as backstory with everybody anyway. And they are reinventing a lot of stuff. So they used characters that they could do stories with then. But having said that, my story is from the Morrison Porter run of JLA, which came after that series. And it did go back to those big characters, but I feel like probably just because of the way they integrated it with what was going on in the books at the time, month per month, I felt like it didn't feel like a licensed comic book anymore when I was reading it. And that was definitely part of the appeal of this run for me, because this is definitely my favorite run of Justice League, was the Morrison and Porter JLA run. And it was coming out like, okay, so like I had just turned 16 when this started, and I was driving to the comic shop on my own now, and like when JLA would come out, I would sit in the parking lot and read it before I left. Like I had to read this book now when it came out. And so the one I want to talk about is issue number 5 of JLA. And this is a story called Woman of Tomorrow by Grant Morrison, Howard Porter, and John Dell inking. And so this is, it starts off with Doctors T.O. Morrow and, it's freezing up on me. Digital technical difficulties here. But it's Professor Ivo and T.O. Morrow, sort of Silver Age Justice League villains, have teamed up to create a new robot called Tomorrow Woman that is a hero that they are going to use to kind of infiltrate the Justice League. So the story also starts off with, this is Superman Blue now, as he had just turned into that in his monthly book. But he's at Metamorpho's funeral, who died in the first story of the run. And I think at some point they are saying that he is inert, because they don't really know what his situation is after he crashed to Earth in the first story, and he is considered dead. And so they're burying him in this superhero graveyard. And you can see statues of the other characters. And the other ones we see in here are Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, Ice, Barry Allen, Flash, Johnny Quick. So, and most of those characters, pretty much all of them, including Metamorpho, are back now. So again, the sort of revolving door of death in comics, which is even brought up. But this is also the League is starting a recruitment drive. And so we have a lot of cameos here from characters of the time. So we have Artemis, Green Arrow, the Connor Hawk version from the 90s, Damage, Mike's version, Hitman, Guy Gardner Warrior in this one, Steel, Supergirl, Plastic Man, and Aztec, another personal favorite of mine, and Max Mercury all showing up to the tryouts. And there's some good sort of funny one-page things with some of them, being interviewed and things like that. And then all of a sudden there's an explosion. Through the wall comes Tomorrow Woman, who is like holding up all the rubble, making a big splashy entrance here on the JLA's Watchtower moon base. And so then the story kind of follows going over the course of probably a few weeks, where the Justice League is trying to stop this machine called If that is kind of playing with probabilities and things, I think. And then Tomorrow Woman is kind of helping out and kind of proving herself over the course of, as this thing kind of works its way across the country. And the whole point is she is supposed to, at some point, turn and like blow up and kill the Justice League. It's kind of the master plan here. Instead, though, she sacrifices herself to destroy the machine to save everyone. There's a line where previously Tio Morrow says that he left the word freedom out of her vocabulary because she is their tool. And at the end of the story, after she has sacrificed herself and is sort of deactivating, Superman asks, "Why did you do it?" And there's sort of a click and a message of word not present in vocabulary, because it's, what Morrow left out of her. And at the very end, we have Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter show up. They have found Tio Morrow and Ivo now. They've traced this back to them. They've pieced together what's happened, and they kind of take them in. And at the end, we have Superman burying Tomorrow Woman in the graveyard with all the other, dead superheroes now. And again, this is just like a done-in-one kind of good story. It was in between, trying to think now, it was the New World Order trade, the first sort of collection of the JLA run, and then right before the Zoriel Angels and Heaven story. So it's bookended by two very big stories, and it's sort of just like a nice kind of character piece done in one story. They did bring Tomorrow Woman back in the, I want to say it was the Girl Frenzy event they did a little while later, where she had a one-shot that I think kind of takes place simultaneous to this story. And she ended up getting an action figure from DC Direct early on, too. They did a line of robots that I think were also the 90s Hourman and Mazo that they did figures of, and she was part of that line. So pretty good for a character that was just in one issue of JLA one time. But it's a good story, and I've always wondered if they would ever bring the character back. I think, it's probably moved on from that. But again, just sort of a fun done-in-one in the middle of a pretty big, bombastic run of JLA stories there, because Morrison and Porter, they just kind of raised the stakes every month, to where that run ended with everybody on the planet Earth getting superpowers, So it just kind of kept, escalating as it went on.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice. I remember the feeling reading that. I didn't anticipate the death, quote unquote, of Tomorrow Woman being so poignant. But Morrison's writing really nailed it. And you're right, it was between some pretty big storylines, or at least building up to some bigger storylines. And that's a great choice. You brought back some memories. I'm gonna have to pull that issue out and read it again.
Yeah, because again, a lot of times with that run, you hear about New World Order, you hear about Rock of Ages or World War III, and they're all great stories, but I think this story really gets overshadowed by, those other bigger runs in there.
I'm not 100% sure. Go ahead, Scott.
That's a run that I actually have heard so many people talk about that I actually only read the first couple of volumes of that just within the last couple of years. And I struggled a little bit with like some of that's not my Green Arrow, that's not my Superman. But I mean, those were the characters that were available at that time. and with good storytelling, you get over that eventually. So that Morrison JLA run is all really solid. So
yeah, and part of that too was I think it plays into the this is Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern. It was Hippolyta Wonder Woman for a little bit too, because that was what was going on in her book. It made it feel more relevant to what was going on in the other books. It made it feel like it was part of the regular continuity and what was going on. It didn't feel so detached like I feel like Justice League has felt in the past.
Exactly. I think if I'm not mistaken, I remember making the correlation with Connor Hawk Green Arrow joining the JLA in issue number 4, which happens to be the issue when the original Oliver Queen Green Arrow joined the Justice League in the initial run.
Yeah. Yeah, because he is in, I think, maybe not the next story, but the story with the key. I think that's when he joins, because I think he shows up. Connor Hawk shows up to the Watchtower at the beginning of the story a few issues later.
Right. Good stuff.
Yep. Well, Mike, what did you want to talk about with Justice League?
Oh, I just got a few notes. Nothing really.
Cool.
Nothing too outlandish, but well, most of you folks and most people that know me, it's in this circle of comic fandom. With me knows that I'm a big Justice League fanatic, and it'll show with this. I put a little effort into put together a description of one of my favorite Justice League stories, and I can't say there is one because there are so many. These are things that they tend to change. So, but anyway, I just to give a little bit of historical context. This being the 60th anniversary of the Justice League of America means it debuted in 1960 in the cover dated February-March issue of The Brave and the Bold number 28. But actually, it was on sale in late 1959. If you're I always check Mike's Amazing World of Comics, and he's got the on sale date. So it actually hit in a previous decade just by a month or so. Now, my love for the Justice League it goes back to the 70s. I was enamored with superhero types of all kinds in my formative years, but it wasn't until I was like maybe 10 or 11 that the Justice League really took its place at the top of my fandom. I remember picking up an issue at Walmart. No, it couldn't have been Walmart. It had to be somewhere else because it was in the 70s. But I remember the first issue was one of these disaster movie type issues, and I thought, oh man, this is great. I like the idea of getting so much bang for my buck with a team comic. I know a lot of people that like team comics. They feel the same way. You're paying the price of a 50-cent comic book or whatever it was back then, and you're getting to see all of your 4-color heroes in one story. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the smaller stories or the mystery stories, but it was those cosmic level threat stories that really drew me in. And in this issue that I'm going to cover, which by the way is Justice League of America number 200, Jerry Conway, the writer, had a foreword, and his quote was, "The Justice League was cosmic before cosmic was cliche," and I thought that was pretty apt. I love the all hands on deck concept, and plus I was introduced to the multiverse through the JSA JLA annuals. Our annual get-together stories through this series. So that was really icing on the cake. You got to see not just one big hero team, you got to see two. And so anyway, by the time I was really deep into reading Justice League, the stories, really fortunately for me, they had kind of progressed from those plot-heavy Gardner Fox type stories, which were, they were great when it came to plotting and science fiction and things like that, but they weren't really great on character development, at least when I, in retrospect, going back and reading all those older ones. So when I got into them was in the 70s, and you had authors or writers like Denny O'Neil and the like. So, but that's not to disparage Gardner Fox. I mean, he created not only the Justice League in 1960 with Julie Schwartz, the editor, But he also, back in 1940, conceived of the Justice Society with Sheldon Mayer. So that's pretty astounding. And then, that's not even to mention that he spent 8 solid years writing the Justice League, 65 issues before, plus the Brave and the Bold issues, before he was replaced by Denny O'Neil. So you had other writers that came in after that. After Denny, you had Mike Friedrich, Len Wein, Steve Englehart, and Cary Bates. They all had stints, and some of them provided some of my favorite stories, but none of them came close to the stalwart Jerry Conway in sheer volume. Over the course of 9 years, Conway wrote 93 Justice League stories, and I didn't even know that until I did a little research and counting. I knew he had from like 150 something all the way close to the end, around 260. So anyway, that leads me to my choice for a favorite Justice League story. Like I said, I could have picked anything from the Giffen DeMatteis, which is kind of ironic. You guys you picked favorites from 2 of the other runs that I really hold really up high, and that's the Bwaha Justice League. I could have easily picked something from there. I could have picked something from the Morrison run, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to restrict myself just to the original run because it was more comparing apples to apples. There were storylines like the Freedom Fighters introduction by Len Wein, the Englehart No Man Escapes the Manhunter storyline, even the body switching Secret Society of Supervillains story from like 166 to 168, which served as the foundation for the Identity Crisis story. All of those were something I could have picked. So all that is my lead-in to my synopsis, which I'll get to right now. So issue 200 of the Justice League of America is a 72-page story written by Jerry Conway, of course. The story structure is a tribute to the early Gardner Fox, Mike Stokowski tales, with members splitting into smaller teams to fight an individual threat and then regrouping at the end of the fight at the end to fight the larger menace. The incomparable George Perez provided the framework sequences of this story that separated the individual chapters that were drawn by 8 different pencilers that were, you could tell they handpicked them based on the characters that were in those chapters. I don't know, did you guys happen to read this recently, or have you read it in a while?
I have this, and I have read it, but it's been a while. So this is basically reading it for the first time again.
I have it in my hands, but I've never read it. So,
well, consider this a comic challenge. It's old school, and you'll go, okay, that's formulaic. I've seen this many times before, but it was really well done, and it really felt like an homage to the old way of doing it. So, I'd love for you guys to read it and let me know what you think. So
that's all intentional because of the anniversary aspect.
Right.
Issue. This isn't like bad writing or something. They are essentially doing a throwback with this.
Right. Exactly. So the first sequence is a retelling of the first sequence in the book is a retelling of the origin of the team from issue number 9 of the run, during which they battled the Apelex aliens. And the first time I tried to say that, it came out like it sounded like an iPhone, like the newest iteration of iPhone, Apelex. Anyway, the Apelex aliens, and they battled them back in the origin in issue 9, and they learned how teamwork pays off. So in this fantastic 2-page spread, and you got the comic out, Scott, I seen you have to look at that issue or that first couple pages with the Justice League satellite, and it's presented and it's all of its technological glory and detail by Perez. Like at 22,300 miles above Earth, and I'm telling you, if this was Mike Atchison's world, there would be a statue or a model or something of the satellite, because it's just, to me, it's iconic as the USS Enterprise. So anyway, the roll call lists the 7 original team members and 7 of the new members that joined throughout the years, with special appearances by Green Arrow, who wasn't really an active member at the time. And then you had Adam Strange and the Phantom Stranger in the roll call. Chapter 1 is drawn by Pat Broderick, who is the Firestorm penciler at that time. And in this sequence, Firestorm's on monitor duty. He's the new guy on the block. He's in the satellite, and he's attacked by the Martian Manhunter, who hasn't been around for a while. He's been off the, not been on the team for years. And when the Manhunter barges in, he doesn't understand why the Justice League headquarters was no longer in the cave down in Happy Harbor, Rhode Island. So he thinks Firestorm is the enemy. He quickly overtakes Firestorm, and he mentions that he needs this Apelix meteor from the trophy room. So Firestorm, when he recovers, wakes up, he was able to send out an emergency alert out to the rest of the League, which mysteriously only the non-original members of the League responded to it. Green Arrow's there as well, and when he's hearing the Firestorm tell them what happened, he was taken aback by it, saying that, this sounds like this is something tied to the League's first case, and that the original League members probably didn't respond because they're being mind controlled. He gives them the whole story about the original case, and just for, good measure, Snapper Carr even arrives, and he and Firestorm stay at the satellite when the rest of them split up to go to the burial sites where the rest of those meteors were buried way back when. In Chapter 2, Aquaman battles Red Tornado, and it's narrated by the Phantom Stranger, which, if you know the Phantom Stranger, that's usually his MO. He doesn't really normally get directly involved. This little sequence is drawn by Jim Aparo, which is appropriate because he was not only an Aquaman penciler, but also a Phantom Stranger penciler back in Adventure Comics and in their eponymous runs. Aquaman and Red Tornado tangle, and in the process, Aquaman finds the meteor before Reddy can stop him. In the next chapter, Zatanna fights Wonder Woman with art by Dick Giordano. Wonder Woman also prevails and escapes with her meteor, leaving Zatanna to be treated by the Amazon's purple healing ray. And then we have Green Lantern facing off with the Atom in the next chapter, art by Gil Kane. Again, the old Leaguers don't recognize the new Leaguers because in their minds, it's still years ago before they met them. They're all being mind controlled right now.
This has a feel of like a lot of early Marvel books where the bad or the good guys would meet up and all of a sudden they have to fight, and then later on it's like, oh yeah, why are we fighting?
Yes. Yeah. That's I haven't read a whole lot of Marvel stories, but I know that is and I hate to say the word trope because that almost has a negative connotation, but I like that stuff. I mean, you got the fight at the beginning, then you got the friendly farewell, and everybody's happy,
And how many times in like news columns is it like, who would win a fight between Thor and Hulk, or who would win a fight between Superman and Captain Marvel? A lot of younger readers want answers to those questions, so now they're giving them an answer to a bunch of those questions right here in one book. So
absolutely, yep. And like Stan Lee would always say, when people would ask him that question, it's up to the writer. So anyway, the next chapter is The Flash versus Elongated Man by Carmine Infantino. Now, this is the one matchup I'm thinking, okay, they went to great lengths to make sure they put the right artist with the match, but I mean, Flash versus Ralph Dibny just really isn't fair. Poor Ralph didn't have a chance. He makes short work of Elongated Man and heads back to the original Justice League headquarters. And then in that next one, I want you to, if you get a chance, take a look at the next chapter with Green Arrow and Black Canary versus Batman. Now, oh my goodness, this is beautifully rendered by Brian Boland. And, I've been happy if they had Neil Adams or Mike Grell do it, if, considering their history with the characters. But how could I ever be disappointed by this art? It's just fantastic. Batman, of course, defeats the duo, and when he gets back to the Justice League headquarters, he explains that he knew Green Arrow, but he looked different, obviously because of the goatee. When he knew him, he didn't have all that. And, there was a woman with him that he didn't know, and it appears that the old Leaguers, the original ones, are starting to wake up from their dream state because they're becoming more suspicious of their own actions. Then next, you have the chapter with Hawkman versus Superman. Hawkman's quickly defeated by Superman and is left drifting on the edge of Earth's atmosphere before mysteriously disappearing. And in a great play of plot device, just to make sure they get Adam Strange in the story, what made Hawkman disappear was he got zapped by the Zeta beam to the planet Rann. Of course, that's our favorite space hero, Adam Strange's home, or not home planet, but it's his adopted planet. And although they are friends, and a nice bit of continuity, I might say, they're friends and have been for years. The recent Rann-Thanagar War that was depicted in showcase numbers 101 through 103 has created this tension between the planets. And Adam's like, look, this is my buddy. You guys are my buddies, but I got to send him back to you guys because he can't stay here. You know, it's like you get a visit from one of your high school buddies, and you're like, oh man, how long is he going to hang around? You know. And so Adam, he reaches out through, the communicators to the Justice League and said, hey, I'm going to siphon off the Zeta energy from Hawkman's body. So he reappears outside the satellite, be ready to snag him. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the book. Elongated Man gets to be the hero by stretching farther than he's ever stretched before, which they say is like over 1,000 meters, to miraculously recover Hawkman and reel him back into the satellite. The original Leaguers start to question their actions finally, wondering why they brought the meteors back to the headquarters in the first place. And while they ponder this and ponder why the headquarters is in such a ruin, which we know by now it's because they've been gone from there for years. This is when we finally get to see the bad guys, the Apelix aliens burst out of the meteors, reborn as clones of themselves. Sounds like Jerry Conway was practicing up for his clone storylines. They had programmed the meteors with a timed hypnotic suggestion into the minds of the original Leaguers, and in a modern day reenactment of the original battle with the aliens, the Justice League is taken out. So the aliens apparently win the day. They decide now, you know what? Now one of us is going to be the one to rule all. So we're going to go into these death match style bouts to decide who's going to lead the Empire, which was kind of far fetched, but hey, whatever. So one of the best group. This might be my favorite shot. In fact, I've seen posters or backgrounds on computers of this. This group shot of the Justice League displayed over a 2-page spread has them all running towards the camera, and there is this. I'm going to quote it. It's they have no battle cry, nor do they need one. They are 15 of the greatest heroes this weary world has ever seen, and their strength resides not in simple slogans, but in their very identity. For they are the Justice League. Yeah, that is outstanding. Obviously it's like it's Jerry's way of saying, well, we're not the Avengers, we're not the Titans, we don't have a cool, Avengers Assemble, which that is hard to beat. So we're just going to say they don't even need one. So then finally, the next 2 chapters feature small groups of the League taking on the different groups of Apelix aliens, interrupting their death matches and defeating them all. And then in the epilogue, Green Lantern and Red Tornado dispatch of the remains of the aliens into the sun, hopefully forever this time. So the team saying their goodbyes to Snapper Carr and to John Jones, who's going to return to New Mars, which was relocated, obviously, outside the solar system somewhere. And just when we think that Green Arrow is going to leave the team and remain in an inactive status, the team asks him to stay, letting him know how much they need him. As he heads toward the transporter, he says, you know what, I'm a loner, and the League's too big for him. But then he says, you know what, though? He realizes maybe I'm the one that's thinking that I'm too big for the League, and I'm not such a loner after all, and he agrees to come back in a great final scene. And in my mind, this is the epitome of the feel-good Justice League adventure. It highlights their strengths, not individually, but in their teamwork. And it's ultimately the moral of the story. The teamwork is just like it was in the original or in the Justice League origin story. So I hope I didn't belabor that too much, but it just brings me great joy to go read this again and to go over it.
The other book that reminds me of is Contest of Champions from Marvel, which also was in 1982, but it was released after this. And in that, you have these a couple of different or two different like super powered individuals who recruit heroes from Earth and then have them go and fight each other. So I had to go online and look that up and see, and yeah, this predates that by a few months. So I guess it's looking like to me that I think it was Bob Layton who was the writer on Contest of Champions. He must have seen this and thought, "Oh, hey, that's a good idea." And then that actually was, I think Contest of Champions is considered by most to be the actual first limited series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that, but yeah, written by Grunwald, actually art by Romita Jr. and Bob Layton. So
now, how many issues with that? Because I think
3.
I recently bought issue 1 of that.
It's 3 issues.
Okay.
So, but anyway. I don't want to derail Justice League, but that's just what it reminded me of. So all these heroes fighting heroes and in different settings, and they're being sent off to different areas, and yeah.
If nothing else, this was a great production. It was great production value to this for a comic book. I think it kind of it preceded itself. It really was. It was ahead of the curve, I guess, in production value for a comic book.
It's also interesting to see the Joe Kubert school get a credit in the Hawkman story. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Just real quick to interject here, World of Krypton was a 3-issue miniseries from 1979.
Okay,
just throw that out there.
That's good to know. I just had heard that. I'd never ever researched it, whether or not it was or was not the
first.
It
might be the first Marvel miniseries.
Maybe that's what it is.
Might be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot you had World of Krypton and Krypton Chronicles, and they were early on, but it's all in the same era. It's just
yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna have to get that whole series of the Contest of Champions and see how that reads. But it's my kind of story.
I tell you what, though. So I was looking at, as Mike was going over this, I was looking at this issue of Justice League on my DC Universe subscription because my copy is in storage right now. It looks so much better on this tablet than it did on that old newsprint. And I'm all about reading stuff physically like that, but yeah, especially like the Brian Boland segment looks so much better than on the old,
my goodness,
absorbent newsprint from 1982.
Well, after we finish this Justice League, let's come back to that because I have a story related to what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, is that all you had on that, Mike?
It is, and I hope I did. I thank you guys for indulging me on it, and hope there's some of the joy rubbed off.
Okay, so like in the last couple of months, IDW re-released the silent issue of G.I. Joe, which I believe was issue 21 of that series.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been, it was re-released on glossy paper, and I believe it was recolored, though I don't know that for a fact.
Right.
But I bought a copy of it because that's, it's just one of those G.I. Joe stories that I consider iconic. And it's like, man, it feels wrong because it was too bright. I mean, this is supposed to be like a sneaky stealth type mission for Snake Eyes and Scarlet, and because of the brightness of the colors and stuff, it lost a little bit. So it was just one of those weird things where, often, when they recolor, it looks a lot better, but every once in a while, it just looks wrong. So.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a debate going on with coloring right now too, especially with reprints, because a lot of the stuff DC's doing now too with some of their older stuff. Look up recolored Swamp Thing. It's a world of difference, and
okay.
it's
better or worse.
Worse.
Okay.
It's the issue of back in the day, colorists knew that the newsprint would absorb a certain percentage of the color, and they adjusted for that. So their mixes of the colors are based on the actual printing process from back then. Now we have slick, glossy paper that doesn't absorb like newsprint does, so you get more vibrant colors. But now with reprints, they are going back and using the original mixes from when the book was originally published, and it doesn't work. You know, you get these really kind of brighter, kind of Swamp Thing stories and things like that. So it's a thing of like, do you recolor it, you know, for that, or do you go by, you know, because the original mixes aren't necessarily what was intended. There's a whole other issue of a lot of, you know, there were women colorists back in the day, and a lot of them, that was the only job for them in comic books. So when you redo their colors, you're eliminating the work of a woman artist from years ago. So that's a whole other aspect that's been brought up with this debate. You know, and so it's a thing of like, I feel like you really need a physical copy of what was originally published if you're going to recolor, just to kind of keep it true to how it was originally presented.
Right.
Now, again, that's a way more time intensive, I'm sure, than just going by, you know, the mixes that are listed from the original books. But I think you're going to get a more faithful, you know, representation of what, you know, was originally published in those comics back in the day. And, you know, kind of keeping with the tone of the book a lot more, as opposed to what we're kind of getting now with a lot of reprints. And I'm not talking about like what they did with Killing Joke, where Brian Bowling went in and recolored everything. You know, we're talking, you know, it's a much more subtle difference than that, but it is pronounced, and you can see the difference when they're side by side.
Yeah, I think whenever I bought the Alan Moore Swamp Thing trades, I want to say that the interior pages were still newsprint on those hardbacks that I had. So,
well, they've done that with some stuff. Like I know some of the Kirby collections they did that with. They used the rougher newsprint, and people were kind of complaining, but it was also like, hey, this probably looks closer to what it was originally intended to be. So, yeah, there's definitely some back and forth there on that.
Well, how does that translate? How does everything you're talking about translate or affect digital? Because, like we talked about, I think the last time we reviewed a Vigilante issue, there was some missing coloring, I thought.
It's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna be a lot of the stuff is being recolored for digital, you know, and it's reprints and things, but digital is really what's kind of, you know, pushing this kind of movement right now. They're trying to get these catalogs online. You know, Marvel has Marvel Unlimited, DC has DC Universe now. They have this giant back catalog they're trying to get up, and they have to recolor everything, you know, for this, or, you know, assemble it somehow.
You mean they're not just scanning it?
Yeah, exactly. I've seen some of that on Comixology with the 90s Ninja Turtles books from Archie, where you can see they are scanning the original comic pages. And it is kind of nice, but you also see, you know, some flaws that shouldn't be there either from the newsprint and the, you know, something that was, you know, a printing error or something on one random book probably. So, yeah, you can go kind of all over the place with this argument.
I was going to see if I could, I don't know how well you guys can see it. And of course, this doesn't do well for a podcast for me to show images.
Right.
But I've got let's see how these two pages look. Okay, so like this is the redone by IDW colors for that silent issue. This is actually the second and the third page of the story. And again, this is supposed to be a dark stealth mission. And then here is the original, you know, from the actual Marvel, and it's on newsprint, whereas that IDW reprint is on glossy pages. And it's like,
so you've got a lot more of the muted colors on the original newsprint.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
Yeah, muted is the word I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I just felt like it took something away from the story. I mean, it does. Especially in a story with no word balloons.
Right.
You know, it really the color means a lot.
You definitely need atmosphere and tone in that story.
Yeah.
To convey what you're doing, because someone didn't have time to write words. But I mean, the other part of that is too, like, I prefer the George Perez New Teen Titans in reprint form. because of the amount of detail he was putting in back then. I don't feel like was translating properly to the newsprint, printing processes of the time. So it's like, while it's not always the best
Big difference.
Yeah. It's not always the best representation for the, line work. It's like the coloring was definitely, adjusted for that.
Right.
So.
All right. We ready to
debate we didn't mean to get into there, but I think it's, it's relevant,
It is.
And
it absolutely is.
Again, we're kind of showing pictures here on the video that, we're talking about, but you can Google this stuff too and look it up online. There's plenty of examples of this.
Whenever when I post the link on Facebook, I'll try to put at least a couple of pictures of those, like some of the G.I. Joe as a side-by-side comparison. Maybe people can get an idea. So
and I've seen people on Twitter going about this too, and kind of showing originals and reprints and things like that. It's pretty easy to see the difference in the coloring. And then you get like the we're trying to think, the Dollar Comics DC was doing there lately with the Brave and the Bold story that had the shoebox joke in it that was taken out for the reprint. Things like that too. It's a whole, other issue of censorship or whatever you want to get into there with that.
Well, are we ready to move on to Vigilante?
I don't know. I'd like to talk about coloring for a while more.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're gonna continue our look at Vigilante. There might be some coloring discrepancies here we could talk about too.
We could, yeah. I guess I could go. Well, you know what? I think I got rid of my trade, my Alan Moore DC's trade that I had read this in originally, but so I just have the issues right now.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at issue 17 and 18 tonight. This time. And again, right at the beginning, right on top of the cover of 17, special issue by Alan Moore and Jim Bakey. Not sure how to pronounce his name.
That's how I've always pronounced it.
Is he? Should I recognize that name?
The only place I know him from, or only comics I know him from, is Electric Warrior. It was a 12-issue maxi series in the 80s. Yeah. And Doug Munch was the writer. And I mean, I remember his artwork was good, but honestly, I don't remember reading him or seeing him anywhere else.
I mean, the artwork is really good, and the facial expressions I feel like are really solid in this issue. So I mean, he's definitely not bad. I mean, I shouldn't laugh about Electric Warrior, but that's just one of those series that I just discount.
In the back of this issue, in the letters column, they mentioned him as being a Scottish artist. So this might be someone who had a bigger run on like 2000 AD or something like that. Again, he's working with Alan Moore. This might be the artist Moore brought in.
Mm-hmm. That makes good sense. It does have an 2000 AD look to it now that you say that.
So I'm going to bet this is probably an artist that sort of English and probably European fans are probably more familiar with than we are over here.
Yeah, I think he must have been around for a while because he was born in 1940 and he passed away in 2017 at age 77. And he was from Orkney, Scotland, which is way up at the top.
Yeah.
Before you get into 17, Dan, I'd just one of the things about these two issues is, this is one of those, like you've mentioned multiple times, there's no comics code on this book, right? And I feel like that these two issues take the maturity tone to the level that I think Wolfman maybe wanted them to be at, but he never ever could actually accomplish that. It's kind of like you see this all the time in like movies with ratings. It's like, we're rated PG right now and we want to be PG-13, because that's the audience we want to target, because people won't go see a PG movie, so we better throw in that one F-bomb. And it's like, it's like Wolfman's just putting in all the little innuendo and all the, however the, what into his stories, and you don't really have any of that in these two more issues, and it's a much more mature story than anything Wolfman gave us prior to this.
Yeah.
Yes. For my 2 cents, Wolfman was very clunky. It was like he was trying to write up to that standard, but he didn't know how to do it. He was just stuck in Teen Titans mode. and he couldn't. And then whatever he did try to write that would maybe meet that no code threshold, it just seemed corny and out of place. Whereas these stories, or this story and these two issues, they were more natural.
It's like, if you ask a 13-year-old to write a mature story versus asking an adult to write a mature story,
Right.
Well, I think you can judge the maturity of the 80s grim and gritty trend all you want. I think you can go back and forth on that. Using Scott's analogy, I feel like if Wolfman is the PG movie stretching for PG-13, I feel like Moore's runs are the horror movie being rated PG-13 to get the audience that is toning it down, if anything.
Yeah.
I think, we've seen what happens with Moore when he's kind of unleashed to do his own thing, not having to, answer to editors and things. So I feel like, if anything, he's kind of toning down what he would want to do here in these issues.
And then one more thing before you go on this is that it's just one of those things where it's almost like Moore has had a story that he's wanted to tell with this type of character. So to me, this is something he's probably had, notes on for months or years. Yeah. And all of a sudden he's put in this opportunity. It's like, hey, you want to write Vigilante? And it's like, yes, I have the story.
I could see that. I could see that with this.
Because I think this could have been written for the Punisher or any number of Vigilante characters. So he probably just had a generic, story. It's like, give me the chance to write this story and I'll put your character in it. So,
yeah. Okay, so getting into issue 17 here, we've got an opening of a mother calling Chase at his house, waking him up because she is afraid because her husband has just been released from prison after he attacked their daughter. And so there's some nice back and forth here in this first sequence of Chase on the phone and the mother kind of going back and forth their dialogue as we see the father kind of making his way to their apartment where they're at, kind of tracking them down and kind of breaking into the apartment now. And again, this is a guy who did something horrible and has been released early for good behavior. So again, sort of not quite, Vigilante's purview, but definitely adjacent to. And so while Chase is on the phone, the father is breaking into the house. Chase is getting dressed up, in his outfit and trying to get there as the attack is happening. Meanwhile, the daughter runs away, and we get a segment of these two ladies of the night, I guess we can call them, almost hitting the daughter in their car as she's running away and kind of taking her to protect her. And then we have Chase getting to the apartment now, and the mother is dead and the child is gone. And we go back to the women who have taken the daughter, and we're sort of, kind of learning more about their situation and finding out that her mother died while she was on the phone with the DA is not what they want to hear from her. We'll find out more about their situation and why they don't want to get involved with the law. But then we cut to, and I'm not sure, I really need to know here at this point in the story how much time has passed between these two pages, because now we have Chase back in bed being woken up by one of the women who have the daughter and are trying to get a hold of him now. Hopefully he didn't just find this dead woman and say, oh, well, that's it, I'm going to go back to bed now.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I don't feel like that's what's happened. I really hope it's not. I hope there's a day or two in between here. Just real quick on this sequence, too, I think it's interesting. We see Vigilante's boots next to his bed here. And what I thought was just black stripes on the back of the boots turns out to be actually just empty panels in the boots with white stripes over it. So just sort of the actual design of the boots there and part of his costume, which is kind of interesting.
Are you looking at the physical copy of this, Dan?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to know if you sent out for the how to breakdance ad that's on the previous page.
I did not.
Okay, I'm just curious.
That explains a lot.
My stepmother said I could not take breakdancing lessons when I was a kid, so I never sent away for that. Is there anything you guys wanted to bring up before, in this first.
I just want to say you know Moore Alan Moore he's notorious for having notes, very detailed notes for his artist, and I can see those notes in the artwork. I can see like where on the panel where you talked about those boots where it's not just stripes, it's actual straps with the open panels, and I think that's a great artistic interpretation. But I guarantee that was Alan Moore that told the artist Bakey, draw it this way, and even saying, make sure you draw the phone getting knocked off the nightstand. I mean, that brings a lot of realism, it seems like, to the story. Little things like that.
There's a lot of visual business going on here in these pages. Like, I'm gonna bet that's the specific car he asked for that they're driving and that kind of thing. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that reading through the first time, but now that you've said that, I could definitely see that kind of trash can being knocked over as they're driving by and that kind of thing.
Right.
And that's so much different than like the Marvel method, because I've heard stories like, Kevin Smith's written several Marvel stories, and it's like almost always they end up running way behind schedule because he's writing like these detailed scripts.
Right.
And they're just like, give the artist an outline and let him draw it, and then you can, then you can tweak it. But no, he's wanting to like give him a panel by panel description of books, and so it's just so much difference in the methodology there. So
yeah.
So then we have Chase suiting up again and going to meet the women that have the daughter. There's an interesting thing here too, where one of the women just wants to go to sleep and tells the kid to make breakfast for herself. She says she wants a particular type of cereal called Godzillions, which is apparently a Godzilla-themed breakfast cereal. At one point, though, she's talking to the woman and calls her mom, and that's never touched upon again. So I'm not sure if this is just a slip or, what is kind of behind that part. But again, it's a weird thing to kind of throw in and never kind of go back to.
I think it wasn't a slip. I think it was the girl in her desperation to have a mother figure already so soon after her mother dying, and this is the first woman that's actually cares for her, if not taking care of her properly. These two prostitutes or whatever their profession is, they seem to at least be caring about the well-being of the girl, and that's her way of expressing what they mean to her, in my opinion.
Okay. I took it to mean as a reflection of the mental state of this girl, that she is not. That's how I interpreted it. She just really is kind of, with everything that's happened to her, all the traumas she's just experienced, that she's not quite, where she should be. And I think, and to me, the events that play out later, I think reflect to that as being why she's, doing that at this point. So.
Well, see, again, that's kind of my point too. It's not made clear one way or another what's going on there, and it's just treated like a throwaway moment where I feel like there's more to that. But again,
that's a good point.
Two stories, so who knows? But then we have Vigilante meeting up with the first woman and trying to figure out, where the daughter is, and they get into it pretty physically here. And, you don't see superheroes kind of duking it out with a woman very often in comic books, especially someone that's not, like technically a supervillain or something like that. But then we have a scene in the grocery store where Louise, the second prostitute, has gone to buy the cereal for the girl now. And we see the father there kind of pick up that she's buying this cereal, which you assume is probably the daughter's favorite or something like that. I think is probably how the father is inferring this might be lead back to his daughter.
Well, Louise kind of explains she's buying it for this kid too. You know? So.
And so then we have cut back to the first woman and Vigilante kind of making their way back to the apartment where they're at. And the father has already been there and has taken the daughter and has killed Louise, as we kind of see her last moments here. A little disappointed we don't get the punchline to her joke.
Yes.
That she says here. But, More to the tragedy of the passing.
Okay, I gotta break in with a story there.
Okay.
Well, actually, okay. So many years ago, there was this. I used to like lay in my living room and I would watch television until I was ready to go to sleep, like most people do, right? So there was some movie had gone off, and this other movie comes on called Checking Out with Jeff Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this movie, I started like the first 5 minutes of it, and there's this guy. He's at the grill. He's got all these people around him, and he says, "Hey, how come Italians never cook out?" And then they go, "Why?" And then the guy drops dead from a heart attack. So I set up and watched this entire movie waiting for the punchline. So I was expecting to get the punchline for this joke at some point in one of these two issues, and it never happened. I was so disappointed.
Yeah, we might have to Google that later. That sounds like it's a superhero themed joke that was probably going around the office back in the day or something.
Yeah.
But then at the end of this issue, Fever, the first woman, is kind of letting Vigilante have it. And as they leave, there's a sort of ominous shot of a cleaver going through the box of Godzillions. And at the end here, we've got Next Judgment Day. So kind of going into the letters column real quick, we've got some editorial business here from Marv Wolfman saying that they are sort of under the gun with deadlines, and so that's why there have been other writers coming in and talking about how they have Alan Moore and Jim Bakey coming in for 2 issues. But at this point, anyway, it is the plan for him to come back to the book. And later on, towards the end here, we're also getting, we're kind of getting the hype train rolling on Crisis at this point. And now they're starting to talk about the Who's Who series and things like that from back in the day. He was also working on. Is there anything?
I don't know if he was actually working on Who's Who, really. It was George Perez and Len Wein,
right,
mostly. But Crisis itself and the history of the DC universe is, I bet that's what I bet you're thinking of, is that two issue prestige format that Wolfman and Perez did.
Any other thoughts on this issue? Or
yeah, I really feel like Moore did not understand that the Vigilante was not just a guy in a costume, and that there is some superhuman element to Vigilante in some of the fights.
I don't think any writer
understood
that, because they really don't play into it other than this sort of not Wolverine level healing factor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
right.
Yeah, I mean, he loses more fights in these 2 issues than he wins, and it's against people he should not be losing fights to, you know. So
well, I mean, it's definitely a more street level story than we've gotten really even in the rest of the book. And we don't have like any kind of crazy supervillains.
Yeah, which is probably why it was probably written for another character and just adapted.
I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case.
We ready for 18?
I think so.
Oh, okay. And one more thing on 17, and I think you kind of mentioned this, and I just want to reiterate it. So at the start of that story, when that phone call goes out from the mother to Adrian Chase, we see the Vigilante's costume basically strewn about his home, apartment. I can't figure it out exactly what it is. So I guess he doesn't expect much uninvited company to show up at his house.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem in keeping with the rest of the book. But, the character. Back to that first sequence, though, too, real quick. I just want to point out, in this first issue, the father never speaks. We never hear any words come out of the father. It's all conveyed through the art, and sort of the menace of the character is definitely conveyed through the artwork.
He yells Joni one time.
Did he?
Yeah, at the very start, if he's coming up the stairs, he yells for his wife, his ex-wife, or whoever it is. I mean, there's one scene at the bottom of page 3.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Yeah,
but it's through the door.
Yeah, it's just, as far as I know, unless you count oomph on the next page. Well, no, then he says,
"Oh no, there is some more here, isn't there?" When he's breaking in.
Yeah, who's got a kiss for daddy? So there's a few times.
Think of those first couple pages there or something.
Yeah, but after that, he doesn't really say a whole lot.
No.
So, all right. So issue 18, and issue 18 is kind of framed around this letter that Carl Lineker, who is the father, has written to his daughter Jody, apparently during the last couple of weeks of his time incarcerated. So, and in that letter, it includes some photos. I think there's like 4 photos. And then those 4 photos are shown, every couple of pages here inside of the story. So, so everything is just you get the entire contents of the letter and the envelope and the pictures throughout this particular issue. So, and the photos are basically 4 positive, I guess, scenes of what's happened. And I guess we didn't hit on or touch upon why the father went to jail, right? So yeah,
right.
So the and there may have been more than just this, but apparently the father sexually abused the child, as an 8-year-old. So okay. So here in this first scene, we actually are seeing kind of the end of the story, or near the end of the story, where we have the Vigilante and Carl are fighting each other. And really we get to the point where Vigilante does get the upper hand. And then we flash back. So now we go back to the end of issue 17, and you have Vigilante and Fever are talking to some of Fever's neighbors about whether or not they saw anything. And at first the neighbors do not want to help the quote unquote super cop, which is a term that Moore uses multiple times throughout this story. But then they learn that Louise is dead. So then they're quick to share what they know, and they let Vigilante and Fever know that Lineker left in a purple Mustang. So Vigilante wants to leave Fever because he feels like that she's going to slow him down. But Fever points out that, this is her neighborhood. She knows what's going on. And, oh, by the way, if you look at your motorcycle, it's been stripped down to the frame. And which why they wouldn't have taken the frame, I don't know. But Fever takes off in her car, and of course Vigilante has to dive into the vehicle, grab hold of the back, and go in through the door while it's moving to keep up with Fever. So the next scene, we jump over to that purple Mustang, and Carl is there with his daughter Jody, and she is of course crying in the front seat. And Carl is trying to make some type of connection with his daughter, but when she continues to cry, Carl decides that, he's been the breadwinner for that family, and now he's going to show her how he makes his money. So they go into a gun shop. He takes his daughter with him into the gun shop to go and quote unquote buy a gun. But whenever the owner of the shop, leans over the counter to look at a particular gun, Carl basically smashes him into the glass and takes the gun and some ammunition and then leaves. So back to Vigilante and Fever, and they're having this discussion about authority and all the problems with authorities and fathers and how that ties into society. Fever jokes about being an authority on authority, and then she thinks that's funny, because she's railing against authority, and then she says that she's an authority on authoritarian figures. So she says, "Oh, I should tell that to Louise," and then it kind of hits her that Louise is dead. So we have this scene where Vigilante, who's been in the backseat of the car while Fever's driving, actually, comforts Fever. And then after Fever regains her composure, she's trying to clean herself up and looks in the rearview mirror and notices purple Mustang in the rearview mirror. So Vigilante jumps out of the car and is able to shoot out the tires of the purple Mustang. So I don't know, anything you guys want to point out before we keep moving any further?
I expected something more sinister, I think, from the photos, because again, you realize pretty quick there are only a few photos you're seeing here, and again, we can get into this towards the end, but it definitely stuck out that, hey, we're only seeing a limited number of photos again and again, and you're kind of wondering what the deal is with that as you're kind of reading the story here.
That kind of made sense because, these are photos that he had with him in prison.
Right.
So, anything wrong he would not have been allowed to keep with him. So,
yeah.
And it may have been skewing his memory of, how close they were. So
yeah, you don't take photos of the bad times.
Yeah, exactly. So, the tires have been shot out on the purple Mustang. So Carl and Jody flee the car on foot and head into a fuel processing plant, is what I'm assuming that this is. Vigilante catches up with Carl, and they exchange some blows. Well, Carl hits Vigilante's red mask, and it shatters. So Carl looks into the eyes of Vigilante and recognizes him as Adrian Chase, because I believe Chase was the one who was the DA whenever they were prosecuting that case. So basically at this point, you know that Carl is not going to make it to the end of the story.
Yeah,
I thought the same thing.
That was a good device too for the story. Like, how does he learn his identity? It's not just pulling off the mask; it is breaking that visor, and it really makes you question the effectiveness of domino masks and things like that.
Or any of them. I mean, look at the original Vigilante. I mean, his mask was only just a kerchief over his nose on down, like what we wear today in COVID times.
Right.
So at this point, so Chase gets the upper hand in the fight. And with Carl on the ground, basically he starts, punching him repeatedly. Jody, seeing her father being beaten, and you would think that she'd be, cheering that on, picks up the gun that Carl had dropped and shoots Vigilante in the shoulder. And Vigilante really is kind of shocked by this response from Jody and asks her why. Well, at that point, this car comes screaming into the scene with Fever at the wheel and runs Carl over. Jody now aims the gun at Fever and threatens her because, she's hurting her father. But she doesn't take any action against Fever, where she had been willing to take action against Vigilante. So Vigilante is able to walk up to Jody and just take the gun out of her hand with no actual resistance from Jody. So here's where things get a little crazy. So Fever then backs the car up to Carl, takes the time to put it into 4-wheel drive, and just runs him over. So Jody is screaming for her father, runs to them and screams at Fever for killing her father, but allows Fever to then comfort her. And Fever's obviously a little confused about, Jody's response, because she's like, well, isn't that what everybody wanted, is for this guy to be dead? So in the parking lot of the hospital, we see Vigilante shoulder, he got a sling for his shoulder where he's been shot. And he's carrying this envelope. All right. And he talks to Fever, who's reading a paper. So, and then on the paper, we see there's a story here about the Louise's death. And Vigilante asks Fever if there's anything interesting in the paper, and Fever tosses the paper into the trash and basically says, nope, nothing of interest here. So Vigilante then, we kind of get this little dialogue between the two. Vigilante asks Fever if she feels good about what they did, and Fever responds that she doesn't really feel anything. So then basically kisses Vigilante on the cheek and leaves. So we go back to Chase's apartment, and there we see him empty the contents of the envelope, and we see the 4 pictures that were shown repeatedly, throughout the issue, and the letter signed by Carl Lineker, and also Chase's costume tossed, here and there, strewn across his apartment. So, and that kind of wraps up that story. So I don't know what else for you guys.
Well, Jody knows who Vigilante is now. There's that.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. Well, I guess she maybe wasn't close enough to have heard the name said. Or I
think she's right there. I think she is close enough, and it's also the guy that her mother called.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's standing right there. She can. I mean, unless he's whispering there.
It's not. There's no exclamation point. It's just But who knows?
Yeah.
And this is a weird thing. I'm trying to figure out, because they had the whole thing about this tank with no naked light, and it's like, and then whenever they show this scene with Jody, the only part that they're showing is naked, as above her head, and I'm trying to figure out, there's supposed to be some type of symbolism there, because it's really like a weird choice of words, I think, to say, hey, don't have open flame by by these gas tanks.
I don't know, but I wonder if that's the British version of No Open Flame, maybe.
Maybe that is. So
Oh yeah.
who
I
knew
think
that
that's
flammable meant inflammable?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
no. You actually, when you said flammable versus inflammable, I don't know. It made me think of I think there is some English opposites there that I remember reading about once. So I don't want to go any further with it, but I'm almost sure that there's. Anyway, I was just going to say that scene where they where Fever just ran over the dad is pretty. That's graphic and pretty striking, really.
Yeah.
It's
Man.
definitely pretty gruesome for this book.
Yeah.
And compared to a lot of the other stuff that we've seen so far, and it's not like it's portrayed as particularly bloody. We don't see like body parts flying off of him or anything like that.
The worst part is off panel.
Yeah, but it points to that this is actually a mature story, not just immaturity being made mature.
Yeah.
So to me, these have been the best two issues of Vigilante by far. I mean, like the other issues aren't even really close. So I just really felt like it was a step up with the storytelling and what we could actually get out of a character like this in a format like this that we just haven't really gotten so far. So
We have not, and this is a step above. I also think that the utility belt that's being depicted, that Vigilante wears, is much more detailed, and I kind of like how in several different panels or sequences it shows just how many devices he's relying on, which is it's apt. That makes sense. This is a good 2 issues. I didn't expect anything less.
Yeah, I was really thinking this would probably be a highlight of the run. Just you've got Alan Moore coming in for 2 issues and seeing what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I would like to know who he actually wrote these 2 issues for.
Yeah.
So
who was he on the outs with at the time?
Yeah,
because he is. This may have been a Punisher story.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's like I don't know how much. I'm trying to think how much work Alan Moore did for Marvel. I mean, is there very much?
Yeah, but the other thing is, like, where else would you have this story back then? Yeah. Unless it may have been a British book or something.
Yeah, it could have been a British book.
So we want to grade these 2 issues.
I'm going, very fine near mint, which is like a 9.0. I think there are a couple little, I don't know, a couple of points where like the storytelling that he relied on some tropes. It's like the father accidentally being in the same grocery store as Louise and something like that. But overall, I mean, it was really, really solid. So
I think I'm going to go near mint with this one. This is probably more what I was looking for out of the Vigilante book before I started reading it. You know what I mean? It was probably something closer to this. We don't have any of the gaudily dressed poorly named supervillains that we've had previously. It's definitely a much more street level. Again, not that Vigilante goes cosmic or anything like that in the regular issues. But yeah, I think this is definitely going to turn out to be a highlight of the series.
For me, it's a 9.4 near mint as well. It's interesting that when you're grading or evaluating a comic, you try to find the combination of story and art where that lands for you, and sometimes it could be a 7 story, but yet it was a 9 art, and then you try to figure out. But it's a medium where you have it's a combined effort. So with this, I think it hit the mark on both ends, and I mean, maybe everything's relative. A lot of these issues I've graded, I've thought were pretty high up there. Everything from very fine on up. There might have been a couple less than that, but it makes it hard to grade anything that's really good. So, but either way, I think this is a near mint.
Okay, so I searched online for the punchline to that joke.
I knew there that. I was talking, so you'd have time to do that.
Yeah, so there isn't an official answer, but let me just throw you out some of these other ones.
Well,
some
you
of which
want to say what the joke is first?
Yeah. Oh, so what did they say? What did they say to the superhero when he tried to join the Mile High Club? So that's the joke that Louise is giving. So here are some people's responses to that joke. Now, one person says, "Ask Alan Moore," but which I guess is the correct answer.
Right.
But one is, "So sorry, buddy, but rumor has it that you're faster than a speeding bullet." Sorry, buddy, but it's a bit difficult when you're not even in a plane. Let's see. Folks, we seem to have hit an area of turbulence, but don't worry, it'll be over faster than a speeding bullet. Sorry, buddy, we didn't know where you dropped her. So I don't know, but yeah. So those were a few of the repeatable ones. But even on this page on Reddit, they show that page.
So I know I'd heard of Jim Begley somewhere before, so I just kind of looked him up with what's in my collection. And so he worked on the Tomorrow Stories from the America's Best Comics line.
With also Alan Moore, right?
Alan Moore's baby. And so he worked on the, what was it called? Future American feature that was in that anthology book.
Okay.
So that's where I kind of remember him from. So, yeah. Well, anything else we need to go over or bring up?
I think we about covered it. So,
okay. So yeah, just kind of remind everybody coming up October 24th, Saturday, is the next mini-con at Campus Comics. And again, we are located at 816 East Main Street in Carbondale, Suite B. And we are open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 6. You can give us a call before you come over at 618-457-6011 or find us on Facebook or Twitter. Scott, where can everybody find you?
Burgcomics.com, BURGcomics.com, and of course on eBay and Facebook and Instagram and most of the social media sites. So, and on the 24th hopefully at Campus Comics.
There you go. Mike, what about you?
I feel so deficient whenever I follow you guys up. Why don't you let me go first from now on? Because okay. All I have is a Twitter account, Mike Atchison 5, that nobody follows. So yeah,
and I'm pretty sure I follow it.
Yeah, I follow it too.
Oh yeah, there's nothing to follow, but hey,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so hey, you find me here on average once a week on this podcast.
And I'm Dan Brown. You can find me online at Detective651 on Twitter, Instagram, and my TeePublic store. There's some sales coming up on there, and I'm posting a lot right now because I've got drawings going up every day for Inktober this month. So you can check that out. And I will also be at Campus Comics on the 24th for the next mini-con, and I'm there most Saturdays. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Voice going.
Everybody now.
Funny when you always say get that out of your system, and then I think, oh my God, he's just jinxed me. I'm gonna have something like tickling him, and I'll be like trying to mute, and then you'll be like, Mike, you're on mute, and it'll be a whole thing.
That's why I keep like 2 or 3 drinks every single podcast nearby, just in case.
Yeah, I always make sure I got something here.
Yeah.
If I had 2 or 3 here, it'd be a problem. I just have one.
Well, mine are tea and water and an occasional Coke. 0.
Yeah.
Voice going. Everybody now. Funny when you always say get that out of your system, and then I think, oh my god, he's just jinxed me. I'm gonna have something like tickle him, and I'll be like trying to mute, and then you'll be like, Mike, you're on mute, and it'll be a whole thing. That's why I keep like 2 or 3 drinks every single podcast nearby, just in case. Yeah, I always make sure I got something here. Yeah. If I had 2 or 3 here, it'd be a problem. I just have one. Well, mine are tea and water and an occasional Coke. 0. Yeah.